A simple act of kindness. The cold wind swept through the streets of New York City, rustling up discarded newspapers and fallen leaves, sending them tumbling across the pavement like forgotten memories. The city never truly slept, but in certain corners, where the neon lights didn't reach and the towering buildings cast their longest shadows, time seemed to slow. It was here, on a quiet street corner between Fifth and Brighton, that Adrienne Sinclair first noticed her. She was always there. An old woman, wrapped in layers of mismatched clothing, sitting against the brick wall of a closed-down bakery. She never begged. Never spoke. Just sat with her thin arms wrapped around herself, her eyes distant, as if she were watching a life that no longer belonged to her. Adrienne had passed by dozens of homeless people before, but something about her made him pause. Maybe it was the way she never reached out for spare change like the others, or the way she watched the world pass her by without expectation, without hope. That first night, he had an extra sandwich from the cafe down the street. Without thinking, he had stopped in front of her and held it out. She had hesitated, staring at the sandwich with suspicion before finally accepting it with a slow nod. No words. No thank you. Just a small nod. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. A habit forms. The second time, it was raining. Adrienne had just left his boxing gym, drenched in sweat beneath his hoodie, when he spotted her sitting in the same spot, her thin coat barely holding up against the icy drizzle. He didn't know why, but he stepped into a nearby convenience store, bought an umbrella, and a hot meal. He didn't say anything as he set the steaming container of chicken and rice beside her and propped the umbrella over her frail form before walking away. That night, as he lay in his penthouse bedroom, staring at the ceiling, he realized he was thinking about her. He had everything, money, status, the best schools, the best clothes, but something about that woman haunted him. The next night, he went back. And the next. And the next. At first, she never spoke. But after 2 weeks, she finally looked at him. You don't have to do this, you know. Adrienne had blinked, caught off guard. Her voice was soft, raspy, as if it had gone unused for too long. I know. He shrugged. But I want to. She had studied him then, her tired blue eyes searching his face for something. Then, she nodded. And just like that, it became routine. The boy and the ghost of a woman. Her name, she told him one night, was Rose. Just Rose, she had said when he asked her full name. That's all that matters. Adrienne didn't push. Instead, they talked about little things. He told her about school. About his boxing practice. About the suffocating expectations that came with being a Sinclair. A name that carried weight in high society but felt like a prison to him. She never pitied him. Never coddled him. She just listened. And he listened to her too. She told him about the stars, how she used to watch them as a child, dreaming of places beyond the city lights. She told him about old songs she used to love, about how she missed the sound of rain against a rooftop rather than the cold, open sky. But she never spoke about her past. And Adrienne never asked. Until the night everything changed. A whisper in the dark. It was a cold December evening. The city was alive with Christmas decorations, the streets glowing with lights and the scent of roasted chestnuts. But in the shadows, the cold was merciless. Adrienne arrived at their usual spot, holding a warm meal and a scarf he had bought earlier. But tonight, something was different. Rose was staring at him, her brows furrowed as if seeing him for the first time. He frowned. What's wrong? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached out, her bony fingers trembling slightly as they hovered just over his cheek. And then, barely above a whisper, she spoke. You have your father's eyes. Adrienne froze. A chill ran down his spine, one that had nothing to do with the cold. His heart pounded. What did you say? Rose's gaze didn't waver. You have your father's eyes. Adrian's hands clenched at his sides. That wasn't a random comment. It wasn't just an observation. It was something deeper. Something personal. And suddenly, the world tilted beneath his feet. She knew his father. How? His throat was dry when he spoke. How do you know my father? Rose looked away. For the first time since he had met her, she looked afraid. I shouldn't have said that, she murmured, shaking her head. Forget it. But Adrian couldn't forget. He wouldn't forget. Because suddenly, a question formed in the back of his mind. A question so impossible, so insane, that he almost couldn't bring himself to say it. But he did. Rose, did you know my mother? She flinched. It was small, barely noticeable, but Adrian saw it. And that was all the confirmation he needed. His breath caught. His mother had died when he was a baby. That's what his father had always told him. There were no pictures of her. No stories. Just a single fact, she was gone. But now? What if that wasn't true? What if his entire life had been built on a lie? His world tilted. His stomach twisted. And for the first time since meeting her, Adrian felt afraid. Because deep down, he already knew the answer. He hadn't been feeding a stranger. He had been feeding his mother. The mother he thought was dead. The lie that shaped his life. The cold wind hit Adrian like a slap to the face as he staggered back from Rose, his mind spiraling into chaos. You have your father's eyes. The words echoed inside his skull, unraveling years of certainty, tearing apart the foundation of his identity. How could she know that? His father, Nathaniel Sinclair, was a man who prided himself on control. A real estate mogul, a billionaire, a force in the corporate world, his word was law. And the only law Adrian had ever known was that his mother had died when he was barely a year old. But if Rose knew his father? If she flinched at the mention of his mother? Could she be his mother? No. That was impossible. Wasn't it? A desperate demand for answers. Adrian's heart pounded as he took a step closer. Rose shrank back, as if she wanted to disappear into the shadows, but he wouldn't let her. Tell me. His voice was low, barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of his entire life. Who are you? Rose looked away. It doesn't matter, Adrian. Hearing her say his name sent another shock through him. He had never told her. She had never asked. She knew. The realization tightened in his chest like a vice. It does matter, he pressed, his breath uneven. If you knew my father, if you knew my mother, then you need to tell me the truth. Rose trembled, hugging her arms around herself. I can't. Adrian's jaw clenched. Why not? She swallowed hard, looking up at him with eyes full of sorrow. Because knowing the truth will destroy everything you believe. A sharp wind cut through the silence between them, but Adrian barely felt it. I don't care. His voice was firm. Tell me. For a long moment, Rose didn't move. She just stared at him, like she was looking at something, someone, long lost. Then, with a shaky breath, she spoke. You were never supposed to find me. A mother buried in lies. Adrian sat frozen, his breath caught in his throat. Never supposed to find her? What did that mean? His voice came out hoarse. Are you saying, he couldn't finish the sentence? He couldn't bring himself to say the words that would change his life forever. Rose gave him a look so full of pain it made his stomach twist. And then, she nodded. Adrian's entire body went numb. His world, his past, everything he thought he knew, it all shattered in an instant. No, he breathed. His mother was dead. She had to be dead. That's what his father had always told him. That's what the newspapers had said when he was old enough to read them. That's what everyone believed. Yet here she was. Not dead. Not buried. But alive. Homeless. Forgotten. And she had been right here, right in front of him all along. Adrian felt like he couldn't breathe. "Tell me everything," he whispered. Rose hesitated. But then, in a voice so soft it barely reached his ears, she began. "A marriage built on control. Your father was not always the man he is now," Rose said, staring at the distant city lights. "Once, he was kind. Or at least, he knew how to pretend to be." Adrian listened in stunned silence as she spoke. She had been young when she met Nathaniel Sinclair, a bright-eyed woman from a modest family who had been swept up in the charm and power of a man who could move mountains with a single word. At first, it had been a fairy tale. Nathaniel had showered her with lavish gifts, taken her to places she had only ever dreamed of. When he proposed, she thought she had found her happily ever after. But happiness, she learned too late, was an illusion. "He didn't want a wife," Rose murmured. "He wanted a possession." The fairy tale ended the moment she said, "I do." Nathaniel controlled everything, where she went, who she saw, how she dressed. Then she became pregnant. And things got worse. He didn't want a child. He wanted an heir. A perfect heir, molded in his image, without weakness, without rebellion. But Rose had other plans. She wanted to love her son. She wanted to raise him with kindness, to let him be more than just a Sinclair puppet. And for that, Nathaniel had called her a threat. Adrian's hands balled into fists. "So what did he do?" Rose closed her eyes. "He took you from me." Adrian's heart stopped. The day his life was stolen. Rose's voice shook as she spoke. "You were barely a year old when it happened. I was planning to leave. I had money saved, a plan to take you far away from him. But he found out." Nathaniel had acted fast. He used his wealth, his influence, and the media to spin a story that would ensure Rose would never come back. He faked her death. He planted evidence. Created false reports. Told the world she had died in an accident. And just like that, she was erased. "He made sure I had nothing," Rose whispered. "No home. No money. No way to fight back. He took everything from her. And now, she was just a ghost, watching her son grow up in a life that was never meant to be hers." Adrian felt like he was going to be sick. His whole life. His mother had been alive. And his father had lied. "Why didn't you come for me?" The words burned as they left his throat. Tears welled in Rose's eyes. "I tried." She had tried to reach him, through letters, through calls, through anyone who would listen. But Nathaniel blocked her at every turn. He was too powerful. And she was just a woman no one believed. So she was left to fade into nothing. Until now. Until Adrian found her. The fire inside. Adrian felt a storm raging inside him. His father had done this. The man who sat across from him at their massive, empty dining table every night. The man who told him to be strong. The man who shaped his entire life. He had stolen his mother. And now, Adrian was supposed to pretend like nothing had changed? No. That wasn't going to happen. His father had taken everything from Rose. It was time Adrian took something back. The confrontation. The city skyline shimmered through the penthouse windows, but Adrian's world had never felt darker. His father's voice rang in his head. "Strength, Adrian. Control the world before it controls you." Nathaniel Sinclair's lessons had shaped him into a man of discipline, strategy, and dominance, a man who made decisions with his head, never his heart. But now, his heart was raging. The father he had admired, respected, and obeyed was a fraud. Adrian's entire life had been built on a lie. And it was time to confront the man who had stolen everything. A silent war begins. Adrian didn't knock when he entered his father's study. Nathaniel Sinclair sat behind his grand mahogany desk, fingers steepled, his piercing blue eyes assessing Adrian the moment he stepped inside. "You look like a man with something to say." Nathaniel's voice was calm, unreadable. "Say it." Adrian's heart pounded like a war drum. "Where is she?" A flicker of something unreadable crossed Nathaniel's face. "Who?" "My mother." Silence. Then, a slow, deliberate smirk tugged at the corner of Nathaniel's lips. "Ah. So you finally met her." No shock. No denial. No remorse. He had expected this. Adrian clenched his fists. "She's alive. You told me she was dead." Nathaniel leaned back, exhaling as if this was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "And what difference does it make?" Adrian saw red. "What difference does it make?" His voice was sharp, filled with an anger he had never directed at his father before. "You stole my mother from me. You stole her life, her future." Nathaniel's expression remained eerily composed. "I protected you." Adrian's hands slammed onto the desk. "You destroyed her." Nathaniel sighed, shaking his head as if Adrian were a naive child. "That woman," he said coolly, "was never fit to be a Sinclair." Adrian's stomach twisted. "You don't get to decide that." Nathaniel's eyes hardened. "I already did." The justification of a tyrant. Nathaniel stood, walking slowly toward the liquor cabinet. "You're angry now," he said, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. "I expected that. But you're not thinking clearly." Adrian let out a bitter laugh. "I'm thinking clearer than I ever have in my life." Nathaniel took a sip, his gaze sharp. "Are you?" He set the glass down and turned fully to face Adrian. "You were born to be great, Adrian. To lead. To carry the Sinclair name to heights even I haven't reached." "And your mother?" "She was nothing but an anchor." Adrian's jaw tightened. "She's my mother." Nathaniel's expression remained cold. "She was weak. I refused to let her drag you down with her." Weak. That was the word Nathaniel despised most. The word he had raised Adrian to fear becoming. Adrian had spent his life chasing strength, believing his father's version of the world. Now, he realized the truth. His father wasn't strong. He was ruthless. Adrian's voice was steady, but laced with quiet fury. "You think you did this for me?" Nathaniel met his eyes. "I know I did." A sick, twisted sense of pride filled his father's voice. Like he truly believed destroying a woman's life had been a noble sacrifice for the greater good. Adrian's hands shook with rage. "You stole her son." Nathaniel tilted his head. "And look at the man you became because of it." A silence stretched between them. And in that moment, Adrian saw his father for what he really was. Not an unstoppable force. Not a towering legend. Just a man. A man who had controlled Adrian's life for years. But no more. A son's revolt. Adrian straightened. "I'm done." Nathaniel's brow furrowed. "What?" "I'm done letting you control me." Adrian's voice was calm, but it held a power even his father couldn't ignore. Nathaniel let out a low chuckle. "Control you? Adrian, you wouldn't have survived a day in my world without me." Adrian's lips curled into a dangerous smile. "We'll see." He turned to leave. "Adrian." His father's voice was sharp now, the edge of command creeping in. "You don't walk away from me." Adrian stopped at the door. "Watch me." Then he left. For the first time in his life, Adrian Sinclair walked away from his father, and never looked back. A new war begins. The moment Adrian stepped out into the night air, he felt lighter. Freer. But this wasn't the end. Nathaniel wouldn't just let him go. He would fight. Because that's what men like him did. But Adrian wasn't a boy anymore. He wasn't his father's puppet. And if Nathaniel Sinclair wanted a war, Adrian was ready to give him one. The war for the truth. The weight of betrayal. The night air was sharp against Adrian's skin as he stepped into the blacked-out SUV waiting outside the Sinclair estate. The city skyline loomed in the distance, its neon lights flickering like ghosts of a past he had never truly understood. But now, everything was different. His world had fractured, and the pieces of his life, his mother's fate, his father's deception, and his own identity, were scattered at his feet. Nathaniel Sinclair had spent decades sculpting Adrian into a weapon, a perfect heir. But tonight, Adrian had chosen to break free. Tonight, he would fight for the truth, for his mother, for himself. The car pulled away from the towering Sinclair mansion, leaving behind the empire his father had built on lies. Adrian wasn't sure what he would find at the end of this road. But he knew one thing. His father would not win this time. The truth in the shadows. He arrived at the small, dimly lit shelter where he had first seen her, the woman with his father's secrets in her eyes. Adrian stepped inside. The smell of cheap coffee and damp clothes filled the air, a stark contrast to the luxury he had always known. People huddled in corners, wrapped in blankets, clinging to whatever warmth they could find. And there she was. Sitting in the same chair by the window, staring at the city with a vacant expression. She looked fragile, but there was something unbreakable in her gaze, something that whispered of battles fought in silence, of years stolen but not forgotten. Adrian's throat tightened. How could he have walked past her all those nights, blind to the truth? He stepped forward. "Mom?" Her head snapped up, her eyes locking onto his. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, her lips parted, and in a voice so soft it nearly shattered him, she whispered. "You came back." A past unraveled. They sat together in the corner of the shelter, the hum of quiet conversations and the distant wail of sirens filling the space between them. Adrian's mother, Evelyn Sinclair, was still struggling to process what was happening. He could see the war in her eyes. The years of pain, loss, and survival. And beneath it all, the glimmer of something she had thought she had lost forever, hope. "Tell me everything." Adrian's voice was quiet but firm. "Tell me what he did to you." Evelyn took a deep breath. And then she told him the truth. The betrayal of a lifetime. She had once been Nathaniel Sinclair's greatest love. A woman who had seen through his power and ruthlessness, who had made him feel something human, until that humanity became a liability. When Evelyn had fallen pregnant with Adrian, Nathaniel had sworn to protect them. But power was a cruel thing. He changed, Evelyn said, her voice trembling. He became ruthless. Cold. Obsessed with control. She had tried to leave. Tried to take Adrian and escape the gilded cage Nathaniel had built for them. But a man like Nathaniel Sinclair did not lose. "He took you from me," Evelyn whispered, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "He told me that if I left, I'd never see you again. And he kept his promise." Adrian's hands curled into fists. His father had not just stolen the truth, he had stolen their lives. "And the accident?" Adrian asked, his voice sharp. "The one that was supposed to have killed you?" Evelyn let out a bitter laugh. There was no accident. Nathaniel had staged her death. He had used his power, his connections, his wealth to erase her from Adrian's life completely. And when she had fought back, when she had tried to expose the truth, Nathaniel had destroyed her. He had taken her wealth, her home, her identity. Left her to rot in the streets, while he raised their son in a world of lies. Adrian's chest burned with rage. His father had stolen everything. And now, Adrian would take it back. The fight for justice. Adrian left the shelter with his mother that night, bringing her to the safest place he could think of, his private penthouse, a place even Nathaniel Sinclair could not reach. But safety wasn't enough. Nathaniel had spent years burying the truth. Now, Adrian would dig it up. And he would make sure the world saw what his father had done. An empire built on lies. The next morning, Adrian stood in his office, phone in hand, making the most dangerous call of his life. "This is Adrian Sinclair." His voice was ice cold. "I have a story for you." The journalist on the other end hesitated. "What kind of story?" Adrian's grip tightened on the phone. "The truth about Nathaniel Sinclair." There was a pause. Then, the journalist said, "I'm listening." The beginning of the end. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Corruption within the Sinclair dynasty. Adrian Sinclair exposes his father's crimes. The Sinclair lie, how a billionaire hid his wife's existence for decades. Betrayal at the top, the son who took down his own father. Nathaniel Sinclair had spent decades crafting his legacy. Now, Adrian was watching it burn. His father had built his empire on secrets and control. But the truth was out. And soon, Nathaniel Sinclair would have nothing left. A reckoning approaches. Adrian stood by the window of his penthouse, watching the world react to the scandal unfolding. He wasn't naive. Nathaniel Sinclair was a man who did not lose. And he would retaliate. But Adrian wasn't that scared, obedient boy anymore. He had chosen his side. He had chosen his mother, his truth, his freedom. And when his father came for him, Adrian would be ready. The fall of a titan. A storm is coming. The air in Adrian's penthouse was thick with tension. The city below buzzed with the chaos of breaking news. The Sinclair empire was crumbling. Nathaniel Sinclair's darkest secret had been exposed. But Adrian knew his father well. Nathaniel wasn't a man who sat back and watched his world burn. He was a man who struck back. And the storm was coming. Adrian stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his reflection barely visible against the backdrop of flashing cameras and angry protesters gathering outside Sinclair Corp's headquarters. His phone buzzed. It was a text from a blocked number. "You think this is over?" Adrian exhaled sharply. He had expected this. He had prepared for this. His father wasn't just going to let him walk away. But Adrian was ready to end this war. The last warning. A knock at the door startled him. Adrian reached for the gun he had hidden in the desk drawer. After everything that had happened, he wasn't taking any chances. He opened the door slowly. It was Detective Harrison. A seasoned officer with salt and pepper hair and the kind of weary expression that only came from decades of seeing the worst in people. He held up his badge. "We need to talk." Adrian stepped aside, letting him in. Harrison walked straight to the living room, setting a manila envelope on the table. "You kicked the wrong beehive, son." Adrian folded his arms. "I don't regret it." Harrison sighed. "I figured you wouldn't. But Nathaniel Sinclair doesn't just make problems go away, he erases them." He slid the envelope forward. "Surveillance caught 2 men tailing you tonight. Ex-military. Not hired for protection." Adrian didn't flinch. "Let me guess. My father's men." Harrison nodded. "You need to disappear. Now. Before it's too late." Adrian shook his head. No. I'm finishing what I started. Harrison exhaled. I had a feeling you'd say that. He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out another file. Then let me show you just how far your father is willing to go. The price of defiance. Adrian's eyes scanned the documents, the photos, the bank transactions. His stomach tightened. Nathaniel Sinclair had been bribing officials, paying off judges, silencing reporters. But that wasn't the worst part. One photo made Adrian's blood run cold. A woman. Slumped over in an alley. Bruised. Unconscious. His mother. Adrian gritted his teeth. When was this taken? Harrison hesitated. Last night. Right after your story went public. Adrian's vision blurred with rage. His father had gone after her. Again. Adrian slammed his fist against the table. Where is she now? A private clinic. My men got her out before Sinclair's goons could do worse. Adrian's hands shook as he reached for his keys. I need to see her. Harrison grabbed his wrist. Listen to me, your father doesn't just want her out of the picture, the reckoning. Face to face with the devil. Adrian barely felt the city streets rushing past him as he gripped the steering wheel, his mind racing faster than the car slicing through the neon-lit roads. The truth had finally surfaced, but at what cost? His father had retaliated the way a tyrant always does, with violence and fear. His mother had suffered enough. This time, Adrian wasn't going to let Nathaniel Sinclair win. The moment he pulled up to the private clinic, 2 armed officers met him at the entrance. Detective Harrison had taken no chances. Room 317, one of them said, nodding. Adrian took the stairs 2 at a time, his pulse hammering against his ribs. He pushed open the door, bracing himself for the worst. But what he saw made his heart shatter all over again. His mother, Elizabeth Sinclair, lay in a hospital bed, her once vibrant face now marred by bruises. The machines beeped softly beside her, the 4 drip feeding medicine into her fragile body. She turned her head slightly, her eyes fluttering open. Adrian, she whispered, her voice raspy and weak. He rushed to her side, gripping her frail fingers. I'm here, Mom. I'm here. Tears welled in her eyes. I tried to stay away. I tried to keep you safe. His jaw clenched. He did this to you. Elizabeth squeezed his hand. Your father, he'll never stop. Adrian's blood boiled. No, Mom, he said. I'll make sure he does. A house of cards falling down. Nathaniel Sinclair sat behind his massive oak desk, his office overlooking the entire city, a king surveying his crumbling empire. The news had been relentless. The scandal had reached every major outlet. The Sinclair name was poison now. Still, Nathaniel sat unmoved, swirling the whiskey in his glass, waiting. He had expected Adrian to come. And he did. The heavy doors burst open. Adrian stepped inside, his fists clenched, his eyes burning with fury. Nathaniel smirked. Ah. My prodigal son. Adrian slammed a thick folder onto the desk. Documents. Photographs. Proof. I have enough evidence to put you away for the rest of your life, Adrian said, his voice eerily calm. Bribery. Fraud. Conspiracy. Attempted murder. Nathaniel didn't even glance at the papers. He leaned back, taking a slow sip of his whiskey. You think you're the first person to try and take me down? Nathaniel chuckled. You think your little exposé changes anything? Adrian's lips curled into a cold smile. Oh, it already has. His phone buzzed. A live press conference was airing. Detective Harrison stood before the world, revealing every crime, every cover-up. The Department of Justice had launched an investigation. The SEC had frozen Sinclair Corp's assets. Board members were resigning. Investors were pulling out. The empire was crumbling in real time. Nathaniel's smirk faltered. For the first time, Adrian saw something in his father's eyes that he had never seen before. Fear. You little. Nathaniel surged to his feet, but Adrian didn't flinch. It's over, Adrian said. The office door swung open again. This time, 2 federal agents entered. Mr. Sinclair, one of them said, flashing a warrant. You're under arrest. Nathaniel's face twisted in rage. You think this is justice? You think they won't come for you next? Adrian stepped back as the agents cuffed his father. You were right about one thing, Adrian said. The world doesn't respect the weak. That's why I made sure you would never have power again. Nathaniel's fury was drowned out by the sound of his own downfall. As they dragged him away, Adrian exhaled. It was done. The Sinclair reign was over. A new beginning. 2 weeks later, Adrian stood outside a modest house on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't a penthouse. It wasn't a mansion. But it was home. His mother sat on the porch, the sunlight casting a golden glow on her healing face. Adrian placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Are you ready? She smiled up at him. With you? Always. For the first time in years, Adrian felt free. He had walked away from power, wealth, and corruption, and gained something greater. A family. A second chance. And a future built not on secrets and lies, but on truth. As they stepped inside together, Adrian knew. This was only the beginning.